So I'd like to shed some light onto the abortion debate. So quick thought experiment. Let's say that there's a professional basketball player who recently gets into a car crash and is in a coma, and the government is forcing you to be hooked up to him for 9 months because one, he's in a coma and will not survive unless he has your rare blood type that only you out of every human in the world can support for 9 months, and it's required that you be hooked up to him for 9 months, and the government is forcing you to do that. Do you think that the government should force you to be hooked up to this professional basketball player for 9 months? That means you'd put your whole life on pause. You would, not be at your job. You wouldn't be able to be with your family and support them how you would like to. You would not be able to go on vacation. You wouldn't be able to drive your Ferrari. No, you wouldn't be able to, you wouldn't be able to do marathons. You would lose a lot of freedom. You'd have to be hooked up to a stranger you don't know for 9 months straight. Does the government have a right to force you to do that? That's a legitimate question. So what's your answer? If you say yes, that the government does have a right to force you to be hooked up to them for 9 months straight, then why don't you become an organ donor? Why doesn't the government force you to be an organ donor? Why doesn't the government force you then to give blood every week, every month to somebody that needs your blood type? So if you're not an organ donor, if you're not giving blood every month, then you'd be a hypocrite in that scenario. Because if you say, yes, we should be hooked up to them, well then you should be an organ donor, because that's also pro-life too. Giving blood every month, somebody might need it. Does the government have the right to force you to do that? And that's a legitimate question. If your answer is no, that the government does not have a right to do that, then I want to ask you, then why do we subject women to carry pregnancy on to birth? Why do we do that? Because the fetus is like a living thing? Well, so is the professional basketball player. He's a living being too. And I have another thought experiment for you. This is from the other side, from the pro-life side. Imagine if someday we could scan the fetus and could tell immediately whether its gender, and we could determine whether it's gay or straight. Let's say that somebody finds out that it's gay, that the fetus is going to be gay someday. It's going to be gay. So does the woman have the right to abort it based off of the fact that they are homophobic? Right? Does the woman have the right to do that based off of that? And if we could scan, if everybody could scan, if this future technology existed where every woman could scan and go, okay, I prefer to have a straight child, white, cisgender, female, male, or whatnot, do they have the right to do that? Be interesting. Let me know what you think. And then also, does a woman have the right to just get drunk, get plastered, smoke a bunch of weed during pregnancy, causing that baby to have fetal alcohol syndrome? Do they have the right to do that? So that's another point to consider. But then on the other side, the pro-choice, I want you to think about this argument, is that if somehow let's just say that I'm an evil scientist, time travel serial killer, and I say to you, I'm done, I'm gonna kill you, and this is how I'm gonna do it. I got my time traveler thing right here, my whole time machine. I'm gonna go back in time and stop your parents from being born. That way there's no evidence. The government can't charge me for the crime because technically it's not murder. Well, if I press that button and go back in time, are you gonna stop me? Why are you gonna stop me? Is that considered murder? Is that considered killing? If I were to go back in time, stop your parents from meeting, stopping you from being born, is going back and preventing a pregnancy the same thing as ending a life? If you say yes, that I'm killing you by going back in time and stopping your parents from meeting, if you say yes, that stopping your pregnancy is the same thing as ending a life, then I want to say to you, then that means that every time a woman has a period, then that means that, like, without fertilization, then that means that they're essentially killing potential future babies. They're basically serial killers. But that's kind of absurd, right? But it's still, you draw the line, the pro-life side, they make the point of, we draw the line at conception, that life begins at conception. But you have to think about that all the times when a woman has a period, those are all potential childs that the sperm could have created. Because in effect, if I stop your mom from ever having a child, from having you, from ever having sex, then I'd stop them from having you. So I guess, where do we draw the line? For me, I don't know if I would draw the line where life begins at conception. I don't know if I would draw it there. I think sperm are living things, the egg is living things, everything is a living thing. You know, there's many different living things. Sperm, bacteria, like, they're all living things. Like, where do we draw the line? Viruses are living things. So, like, at what point does a fetus have human rights? At what point does the sperm, the egg, come together? What point does that have human rights? And I just wonder, if they do have human rights, then I wonder, why do we call it a miscarriage instead of like I don't know, like manslaughter? Like, why do we, like, you see what I'm saying? Like, this gets ridiculous, because, you know, manslaughter is like the accidental death of somebody. Like, if you hit them on the road, you know, it's manslaughter. But, you know, if that happens in your body, are you killing a child? Like, what was that? That wasn't your fault, right? But it's still considered manslaughter. It could be. But then I want to think about this, so that could be considered manslaughter, but then if you intentionally don't have a child, that can be considered murder. But not everybody wants to have a child, but that doesn't mean that we would just call them murderers. So the whole thing about the time travel situation is pretty arbitrary. So it's not arbitrary, but it's just like, it's absurd to say, yes, that you would be killing something if you were to stop the pregnancy of it in that situation. But the pro-life does have valid points on where do we define life? Where does that happen? And I think a lot of pro-choice people, they'll define life as outside the womb, where they're no longer physically dependent on the mother. So that's the thing there. Because I think that George Carlin makes a cool argument. He's like, well, if a fetus has human rights, then why don't we give them all funerals? Why don't we give them names? You know, why do we treat them as if they're not, if they don't have human rights? So I don't know. Like, what does it even mean to be human? But, you know, they make a point that, you know, if we're basing it off of just development, then that means people with developmental disabilities, do they have the same human rights? But of course they do. They have the same human rights as everybody. It's just, I think that the issue is that we, I don't know, I just think life, defining it at conception, I think can leave a lot of things out. Because physical dependency, it's still part of the mother. The fetus is still part of the mother. I don't know if I would say it has its own separate identity quite yet. But I don't know. You can share me your thoughts on this, and I'd like to hear what you think.